Disclaimer: this show is not for the faint of heart or the easily offended. The views expressed here are that of the show hosts only, and not their wives, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, polygamous partners, employers, music artists, businesses, or anyone other than the Cognitive Dissolutions podcasters. The explicit tag is there for a good reason. Please proceed with caution.
Every one of us will have to decide whether or not we want to keep this great republic or whether we're willing to sacrifice it and surrender it to tyranny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Cognitive Dissolutions podcast, where we address the current issues of today with brash humor, skepticism, or aggression to invoke critical thinking in the masses. We take our tightly held beliefs, everyone's tightly held beliefs, mash them up with current events, politics, and religion, and then throw them to the fires of skepticism. We magnify the so-called logic and then blow it all up. There is no green zone of safety for a lack of critical thinking here. This is episode number 6. Your hosts today are Joel, John, and I'm Al, and we are your tormentors. How are you guys doing today?
I'm okay. My wife's got a cough, but I'm okay.
What about you, Joel? How are you holding up?
I am, as usual, living the dream.
Sweet. Another day in paradox. So, the topic that I wanted to start off with today is China announcing that it's doing human cloning. So it didn't really specify in the article whether or not they were just only cloning Chinese citizens or whether or not they're willing to do the doctor shopping, you come in the country, do a clone. But since they had control over the human genome, they were kosher with cloning it since they've done it with other animals. And I wanted to talk about the ethics and morals and rights of a clone and what it means to be a person. You guys ready to tackle that type of topic?
Yeah, I'm sure we can unpack that in 12 minutes. No problem.
I think we can unpack that in an hour and a half.
Okay. So let's jump right into this shit.
Well, obviously Al and I have a different view than John as far as what constitutes a human life. So, one of the first things that I find intriguing about this, believe it or not, is actually from a theological standpoint. If assuming this was, possible to create a human all the way, as beyond just a particular cell or what have you, if you were able to do that, would that being have a soul? From a theological perspective, I don't expect you to necessarily answer that with any accuracy, John, of course, but
well, opinions vary quite widely. I really don't. I don't agree with most Christians when it comes to things like this. I think that Calvin and Zwingli and other Protestant Reformation folk would probably say that no, they would not. But at the same time, they are also of the opinion that most human beings don't have souls, that only the elect have souls. My personal opinion, creation is creation, man. The Creator never said anything about souls. I don't detect anything about souls. Spirits are one thing, then maybe spirits are souls. I really don't know. But as far as clones are concerned, they're created the same as you and I. If they have conscience and they have cognition, then they're capable of having thoughts. And if they're capable of having thoughts, they probably have imagination. If they have imagination, they can believe in God the same as anybody.
So you're just to be clear right now that believing
God's
in God
a
is
imagination. Thank you, Al. You beat me to that. That was just for fun.
In point of fact, the imagination is the only place I can even conceive of something uncreated being conceived of, being thought of. What isn't in the imagination? Let me ask you this: the holodeck does not exist, but you guys were just talking about it a little while ago. The Star Trek holodeck. So, if the holodeck doesn't exist, but both of you know what you're talking about, and it's a real thing in your mind, so but it doesn't really exist. So does that make you crazy?
Good question. Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is we can conceive of I don't know what the plural form of paradox is. Paradoxes. We can conceive of a paradox, and yet it literally can't be because it's a paradox. So I don't know.
That's a wonder of the human imagination. Well, the fact that I can conceive of a creator doesn't make me a clone or real. It just means that I am able to imagine things. You guys prefer to imagine a universe where there is no creator. I prefer to imagine a universe that has one.
So where would you stand on clones being considered persons?
Oh, like I said before, if they're capable of cognition, then they're capable of a lot of things that human beings are capable of. If they act like human beings, I don't have a problem with calling them human beings. Same with robots. I mean, the Isaac Asimov, the iRobot thing. If a robot looks like a human, acts like a human, and passes itself as a human, what is a human? Who are we to say what a human is? Who are we to say that a dog doesn't think?
So you agree with the ruling that apes, that all the great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, should have personhood then, yes?
To a limited extent, sure. I don't think that they should have voting rights. I mean, I think they'd be very easily swayed. But
well, the new studies have shown that great apes, chimpanzees, and orangutans have been viewed actually as being now in the Stone Age, using stone-sharpened tools.
Yeah, I saw something about that. I don't know that I would trust Stone Age humanity with the current level of technology, understanding, or knowledge that we, the current anything that we have developed. I wouldn't trust something that is untrained, even another human being, with such.
But Bronze Age is okay?
I was just about to go there.
I'm going to stop with the digs. I'm sorry.
No, I would not have a problem with a clone being passed as a human being. Where the problem comes in is when you start talking about things like that matter to people, things like money, like inheritance, like voting rights, things of that nature. I mean, let's say you make 1 million clones and you give them all voting rights. Well, what's to say that the person who created the clone didn't hardwire their brain somehow to vote or act in a particular way? When you imbalance humanity, the fear that I have when it comes to creating intelligence is the ability to sway that, the ability to tamper with that. And natural intelligence is completely different. This is why I don't have a problem with, for example, primates being given certain amounts of rights. It's because they have a natural intelligence. You can train them, yes. They can be brainwashed, yes. But it's still a natural intelligence. They're able to distinguish between good and evil, pain and pleasure, things of that nature. A robot can be programmed otherwise.
So the parity, it seems like the parity in our current method of reproduction is really important to the human experience. So if you remove that parity, or even in a more sinister way, change traits to create superior abilities or things of that nature, that gets kind of freaky. So, I mean, having the parity of evolution and natural selection is kind of part of the human experience. If you take that away, I'm not sure what that is anymore.
So, are you saying, Joel, that you don't see the clones as a type of person, or you see them as people under a variant?
At this point, I think it's just a bad idea. I don't know what I would classify them as. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, at a certain point, that's just what you have to call it. But the random nature of sexual reproduction is it just seems like a fundamental principle to this experience that we're all having, that we all have these variables to us. And I'm not saying that couldn't happen with a clone. I think obviously everything that we have after birth is just a culmination of experiences, and we change on biological, even on a DNA level, due to certain stressors in our lives. So, yeah, I don't know, man.
But we're not at the point, at least China, I don't believe, is at the point where they can just create a full-grown human. We're not looking at a Star Wars kind of thing. So it'd be like an infant growing up and being raised.
Sure.
So to me, the way I would see it is they would have all the rights as any other person, because that's just what they are. They're just a human.
It's still tinkering with something that is otherwise natural.
Controlled?
You know, I understand. No. You're misunderstanding me. It's controlling something that is otherwise uncontrolled.
That's what I mean.
I like uncontrolled reproduction. I really do. You know, if nature, okay, coming at it from your perspective, okay, we have developed the way we are because of those mechanisms, that natural process of reproduction. We start tinkering with that, and you're talking about not just violating a law of God, you're violating a law of nature. You're tinkering with something that has made you what you are. This is why I don't think there will ever be a cure for cancer. You know, cancer is the malevolent side of cell mutation, of cell reproduction. So, you know, a benevolent thing, everybody loves it. You know, blue eyes, you know, everybody likes blue eyes. I don't know. But when you start talking about cancer, that's a malevolent side of evolution. In order to cure that, we would have to cure evolution. We would have to cure that which has made us what we are.
No, that's not entirely true. And
I'm not sure we can call it malevolent. I mean, that implies a preconceived purpose. I mean, it's certainly something that bums us out. But
to some degree,
it's a cellular mutation that is not beneficial to the human body. Is that better?
Sure, yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is, to some degree, we're already doing cloning. I mean, with, say, a lesbian couple, two women, or, you know, a mother who's infertile, they can still take her eggs, take out the nucleus of another egg, put it from another woman, put it in there for her genetic splicing, and add, you know, sperm or, you know, another nuclei from another female, her partner, and she can raise that and gestate that infant, and that's technically cloning.
No,
is it? Still, I don't think so.
No,
because there's still with cloning, you're getting exact copies, whereas when you're talking about sort of like the in vitro fertilization process, there's still this thing that happens that I totally don't understand, where the DNA is matching up in such a way that you get very different outcomes, even with the same genetic codes being kind of aligned together somehow. It's about dominant and repressive or suppressive genes, or however you say that. Recessive, thank you. So, yeah, I don't think that's cloning.
No,
a twin is a clone, right?
But
maternal twin.
It goes along the same lines, because all you're doing is taking the genetic code of one person, putting it into a fertilized egg to take over.
Twins are not clones, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not clear on that, because they are genetically, well,
twins are triplets. There are two different kinds of twins or triplets. You've either got fraternal twins or triplets, and then you've got exact twins. Now, what happens with exact twins? We'll start with the fraternal twins. Fraternal twins, let's say you've got two eggs that drop in a woman. Each of them get fertilized, and then you've got two zygotes developing at the same time. They're not going to be identical. They're not going to be even close to the same.
They're just going to be siblings. Yeah.
They're going to be siblings. They're just born at the same time, and they gestated at the same time. With exact clones, you've got a situation where a zygote divides in such a random fashion that it actually becomes two individuals. And those two individuals, because they have nearly identical codes. You've got one sperm, one egg, creates one zygote, and then that splits into two human beings. So those two human beings are going to be extraordinarily similar, but they're not precise copies. You've still got individual variation. What happens with a clone is you're taking an egg, you're taking the genetic material out of the egg, and then you're inserting something that's going to make it into a human being. You're taking a stem cell, for example, and injecting, I don't know, not brain matter, but probably a white blood cell would be the best thing to use. You're injecting the material from an extremely important and extremely intelligent part of the human body, and basically fertilizing that woman's egg with her own genetic material. So it's going to create the closest thing to a precise copy of the adult human being that you possibly can. And you're absolutely right. You are talking about babies.
So right there, you've got a person, by definition, has sapience, it has sentience. Why not give it all the rights of a normal human?
Well, and that's where we talk about
that's what it
about
is.
the ethics of the ought. That's where the discussion, I think, needs to lie more so in the science. Can we do amazing things with science? Yeah. Should we every time? I don't know. That seems to be something we should be talking about.
I
agree.
I got a good one for you there. I am the J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
I am become death.
You love him.
Worlds. He learned a valuable lesson, and it's something that he passed on to me just with that one quote. And this is, and you're absolutely right, Joel. This is one of those things we ought not to tinker with. Manufacturing humanity. There are two things going on there. First of all, you're taking sex out of the equation. Who the fuck wants to do that? I mean, really?
Remember Demolition Man?
Where's the fun? Demolition Man, nothing. Look at Aldous Huxley. Look at Brave New World. I mean, there are so many cautionary tales that have been spun by not just science fiction writers, but even the ancients. I mean, you can find stories about people making copies of themselves in the Babylonian epics. In the Greek epics, you can find stories about clones and manufacturing humanity. No, it's a really bad idea. We've always known it, and it scares the piss out of us.
See, I disagree with that. I disagree with that because it's basically fear-based. It's fear-based. It's we shouldn't do this because we're afraid of what could happen.
Yeah, we're still imagining the consequences. We don't know what the consequences will be. We're projecting.
Well, and that's the thing, though. Until you actually go through the experiment and learn what it could be, what it should be.
But there also are experiments to which you get the Pandora's box scenario. Mm-hmm. So that's the ethics. That's the ethical
I love
dilemma.
the story of Pandora's box. A lot of people think it's negative. I think it's totally positive.
Well,
it is
I don't
negative.
assign.
Are you kidding?
I don't need to assign a quality to it. I just know that if you have some kind of a variable to life that didn't, or a variable to existence, whatever, that didn't exist and then does, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You have to live with those consequences. So if you have the opportunity to debate as to whether or not that should happen, that needs to happen.
If anybody had a question about whether or not something should reproduce, they should have pulled me aside and gone, maybe you're not a good idea.
And you know what? I can't disagree with that.
No, we need more owls in the world. Lots of more owls. We need more racists.
Plan. Oh, fuck. God damn it, I was waiting for that to come in somewhere.
That was a pretty creative way to get it in, I think.
That's what she said.
Yeah. Thumbing it in, boys. Thumbing it in.
Okay, well, we pretty much beat that to death. And now that we've gotten on the racist topic, let's go to a topic that John wanted to revisit. You wanted to revisit safe spaces in light of the Princeton episode where black students were upset over the fraternity and are now asking for segregation. Would you like to expound on that so the audience can understand what's going on?
That was actually a couple of weeks ago now. I'm going to call it up on news so I can give you a little better information here. Basically, some Princeton students have been at safe spaces within the school that are clearly marked black only, and I found it. So I'm going to read something to you here. Black students at Princeton demand their own safe space. They will also ask for separate, or will they also ask for separate bathrooms and drinking fountains? This was by Aaron Goldstein on the Spectacle blog, the American Spectator, on November 20th, 2015. These students are upset that there is no place for them to go where they cannot be safe, where everyone on campus, somebody can challenge them and say something that they are offended by. So they are asking for safe places that are clearly marked. The exact quote from Planet Princeton is, students called on the school to provide a dedicated space on campus for black students that is clearly marked. The students want to be able to name the space themselves and don't want it named after, quote unquote, a white benefactor or person with bigoted beliefs, as evidenced by the naming of Stanhope Hall. They're also in objection to an entire wing of the school being named after Woodrow Wilson. This is basically somebody asking for segregation. This is somebody asking for, I want a closet where I can go to and be in my own little echo chamber. This is Princeton, mind you. This is where something like 15 to 25, depending on the year, % of your congressmen and representatives come from. They come from Princeton. Fully a quarter this year in this Congress, fully a quarter have come from this school. And they are asking for safe spaces.
So I actually did a little research on this, and there was actually another podcast that addressed this very topic, and I can't remember the name of the podcast, so I don't want to throw it out there. But it was emphasized that schools and colleges already have certain safe spaces, and what safe spaces actually are, and it was misrepresented in the episode of South Park that Joel led us to.
Does that surprise you?
Not really. On the last conversation, was that safe spaces are like Alcoholics Anonymous groups or LGBTQ rooms that are currently on college campuses that give you an opportunity to go, look, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing. I need people to listen non-judgmentally to me right now. And when I looked into it further, the black students at Princeton are asking for the same thing that the LGBTQ has. There is a white male students group, a white female students group that have rooms. The Hispanic Latino community already has a room. All the black students are asking for is a separate room in their own wing that's not labeled after what they view as a racist group or racist people, so that they can have a safe space to go to where they're not being judged by other people. They're not asking for the whole school to go that way. And college professors can already take their classroom, sort of like on the day that you guys talked about abortion in your school. They can go, this is a safe space right now, no judgmental opinions, let's have a conversation regarding this topic.
I don't understand how you have a conversation in that context. Like an actual, how do you have the defining characteristics of a conversation in a place where apparently you can't descend from some central theme in some way? I mean, really, I don't understand how that works.
Well, because it's not meant to be a place for a conversation to occur. it's meant to be like a counselor's office
Like
where
therapy.
you go into another room with other students that have experienced something and go, look, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you guys help me out? Understand what I'm feeling, understand how you're feeling, get that camaraderie, and then they leave the room once they feel, calmed down enough, whatever, so they can go have those conversations later, is the intent.
So here's my problem with these safe spaces that we're talking about. I have to side with Joel on this one. When you go to a place like that, you're not talking about a conversation, and I understand therapy. I understand I've had too much, but one of the things they do with us in boot camp is they push us to that point, because the world isn't warm and fuzzy. Okay, college, elementary school can be warm and fuzzy all it wants. Even junior high in particular, kind of needs to be a little bit fuzzy. But once you start getting into high school, and especially in college, all that warm fuzzy needs to go away. The political correctness needs to go away, because the world doesn't work that way. If you're a businessman and your boss is a racist, bigot ass, I'm sorry, you got to deal with that. That's not something you're going to be able to fix. And if you raise a stink about it, if you think that picketing is going to help you, you don't understand the first thing about business. If you're in international relations and you're a homosexual black man and you're assigned to deal with Iran, guess what? You're going to have a hard time of it. Okay, that's reality. There's not going to be any safe space. There's not going to be any quarter. You're going to be hardcore attacked, and you got to be able to deal with that. High school and college, in my opinion, need to prepare people for this kind of world. I'm not talking about a world where that kind of thing should be expected to be normal. I'm talking about a world where that sort of thing exists. And no matter who you are, no matter what kind of future you imagine, that stuff is going to exist. I mean, maybe even clones one of these days are going to be the new racists. They're going to be, hey, I was manufactured. I'm perfect. You're natural. You're not perfect.
Oh, like a Gattaca type of situation.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there is always going to be some form of racism, because that's human pride. That's human nature. It is human nature to want to be at the top of your game, to want to be the best, to see yourself as a best. It's a survival trait, and I understand it. It works. It's perfect. But it generates these feelings in people. As a human being, I want to think that I'm the smartest guy in the room. 9 times out of 10 I am. But that also makes me a dick, and I've got to learn to control that. When I don't learn to control that, that could lead to me being a racist. It could just mean that I'm a dick. It's hard to say. But in many cases, I've been called a racist, and I find it offensive when somebody calls me a racist. Because
I don't, just because I hear it from Joel every 20 minutes.
I'm conditioning you. It's exposure therapy.
But when it comes down to it, I mean, there are feelings, there are emotions, there are thoughts that occur that are perfectly natural. They are human nature. They might sound racist. They might actually be racist. The point is, when somebody is not trying to put you down, if they make an accident, if they do something that they really didn't intend on doing, and you call them out on it, guess what? You just made yourself a dick, because you had absolutely no idea what that guy's intention was. If Adolf Hitler walks in the room and starts talking shit about Jews, you can pretty well guarantee that he's just being a racist. But if Adolf Hitler walks in the room and he starts talking about Jews, don't make that assumption, because he might not be the racist that you think he is. He may just be saying something off the cuff that he doesn't really believe in.
Yeah, that's a problem that I've had. To go with some stories I've been hearing as far as things that happen on Halloween. I wish I had more specifics, and maybe one of you guys is familiar with these cases where one of the faculty for some esteemed college sent out an email, I believe, to some students suggesting that they should try not to be offended by people's costumes.
That was the Princeton case.
That was because these students demanded this person be fired.
Well,
for that.
They're demanding he be fired for different
I'm
reasons.
thinking of
than
a female instructor, so I'm not sure if we're talking about the same
No,
story.
it was a male instructor at Princeton that sent out the email. And the reason why was because one of the fraternities at Princeton had a group of all-white students that said whites allowed, and they dressed up in blackface, sat on the edge of their porch, ate watermelon, and basically were shouting racist epithets the entire time. So black students got upset.
That sounds pretty premeditated and extraordinarily, yeah, I think I'd have a problem with that too.
I would too, yeah.
So the black students went to the administrator. The administrator told them not to be so sensitive. And that's what sparked the whole safe spaces thing at Princeton.
Well, the thing that I'm concerned about is our ever popular slippery slope argument on this stuff. It seems like we're heading towards this place where instead of nation states, we'll have nation safe spaces or something along those lines, and divided in infinite amount of ways potentially. So I understand having a place in which things like counseling or therapy can take place, or groups coming together, like you said, Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that. But in academia, it seems as though it's happening to where the whole campus is set up in such a way that you can't have a conversation anymore. You've got trigger warnings, you've got safe spaces, you've got all of these things that you can't do in the one place that you are, I think, obligated to experiment intellectually with thoughts. And you don't have to hold an idea to entertain that idea. And it's really scary to think that we have a generation now of people that think that they can't have their ideas, discussed Joel, in any kind of way. Yes?
Joel, you just really cut out. You were gone for a good 2 minutes.
I had him the whole time.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I made it. I don't know if I made it to the recording because I think that's happening on your end there. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Fuck me, I'm a dick then.
Well, we've established that, but
Joel, I gotta agree with you, man. The next generation is always scary to the previous generation, but in this particular case, as an American, as a patriot, as a fan of the Bill of Rights, I love free speech, and to have someone else dictate what free speech is to me is not free speech.
It's not, and I'm not a patriot per se. I absolutely believe in discussing ideas, even uncomfortable ones.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you have to be an American to do that. I think, and I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying.
Gee, the French do it all the time.
Yeah. So I'm concerned. I'm literally concerned, and I've said this before, that we are creating through this, whatever this is that's happening, a generation of people that can't stand criticism of any kind. What is that going to look like?
And that is the real problem. You just hit the nail on the head, my friend.
What is that going to look like? That terrifies me. That seems like, if anything was going to be a catalyst for acts of terror, war, the fact that we can't even criticize each other, it's going to make what we do, with the religious wars that we have, or what have you, or ideological wars that we have now, look just pale in comparison. It'll kill us to a man.
I don't know. I think we'll make it. I think there'll be some growing pains. I think that eventually we're going to see that is not a very good way to do business, but I think we'll get through it.
Well, there's this line that I read from a book, and unfortunately I can't remember where it comes from, and I don't think it's a novel concept, but it was definitely from one of my epic fantasy novels that was probably stolen from some other source, but a generation always thinks the next will be the last. And so I don't want to get too caught up in the fear of this, but it is concerning because it's boring. I don't want to be bored.
Well,
Your dissent? How boring.
You want me to disagree with you? I can do that. but it would be disingenuous because I honestly I feel the same way.
Yeah. What about you, Al? It's not real clear to me. I think I would anticipate where you would land on this, but I don't know.
Where
Based
do
on
you
some of
think
the
I would
questions.
land on it?
Well, I think that you're freedom of speech all the way. I would imagine.
Oh, I am. I totally believe in a complete freedom of speech, especially speech that I disagree with. I actually prefer that speech get the most protection.
That's what I mean. That's what the boring comment I was making.
I also understand the need for people to have a place to go, especially at a school, which is supposed to be an educational environment, to be able to go, look, I need a place to step away from this for a few minutes to process
Do these things really
what's
need to be
going on.
mandated now? Do they? I mean, that's the problem I have with this, is that they're being mandated. We've always had this thing that we call a safe space. We just didn't call it that. It's called our own minds, within our own social group, within our own homes. That's where this stuff should be happening. It should be happening in private. You should literally step onto a school ground to get to learn something, and you can't learn something if nobody is telling you that there's other ways to think about this.
I agree. I don't disagree with that.
Our safe space is within our own mind. At least, I mean, that should be the goal.
Well,
obviously, there's certain things we all struggle with.
Part of going to college, part of the educational process is learning that process, but having a buffer for people that are slower, maybe less apt to adapt to that environment until they are comfortable again to maintain that constant barrage.
Problem is, when you keep that all the way up through, when you keep that method all the way up through the age of 22 to 26, and you haven't been sort of weaning yourself off safe spaces, you're going to come up against a barrier, an event horizon of total chaos in your life, because you're not going to be fucking ready when you graduate.
I got to stand with Joel on that one.
I understand that in grade school. Yes, we've got to be very coddling.
You got to keep in mind that colleges are also catering to people with disabilities mentally, so that they could be educated to eventually get out in the workforce. And that's my concern, is people who aren't in control of all their mental faculties having a safe place to go even in college.
Look, you
want
to
learning to adapt.
You want to hope these things happen organically. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't count if it's mandated. It doesn't, because, like I say, as soon as those training wheels come off, you're done. I mean, I would imagine.
Wait, so Joel, it doesn't count if it's manufactured?
I don't think it does. I think that.
We're talking.
I don't know if I don't. No.
No, we are. But in this case, we're talking about intellectual clones.
Sure. Well, I'm talking about these spaces, really. If they're mandated, if people are just holding back until somebody steps out of that safe space or something, I'm not sure if I'm setting that up visually very well. But if it's just that, people are just pulling their punches because somebody is in this particular geographical area, that's not significant in any way.
Okay, stop for a second and think about this for a moment. Say you've got alcoholics that go into the counselor's office, counselor's conference room to have Alcoholics Anonymous class. Are you saying that somebody should be able to burst in that room and just be a total douche?
No. I'm not saying that. And I
Okay,
and
then you're
and I can't
kosher. You're kosher with this concept.
on the micro, yes, not on the macro.
Well, that's all they're asking is for a location.
I don't see that. I don't see that being portrayed in the media. I see this ever expanding
Well, and
That
you,
is the
you as
problem.
well as you as well as I know should not trust the media. You should research it
I know.
yourself, like I
You're
do.
right.
Now, check this out. Check this out. Joel's making a very good point, and I think I'm going to illustrate for him real quick. When the media, okay, so when something happens at school, that's on the micro level. That's the local community. That's a town deciding to erect a monument. Okay, but when it gets on CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, when it gets on the big boob tube, then everybody in the universe is going to hear what the boob tube says. Not what the school is doing, but what the boob tube says. And they're going to believe it because it's the news. Whether they take it with a grain of salt or not is up to the individual, but either way, they're not getting the full story. All they're hearing is safe spaces. So some kid sitting in his living room watching CNN hears something about safe spaces and decides that's the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where I can do, think, and say whatever the fuck I want, and nobody can do anything about it because it's my opinion.
Welcome
And the
to my
safe
world, my
space is
friends.
like a bubble around them that is constantly with them. It's almost like equating intellectual ideas to assault in a real physical way. Certainly that's off limits. But when you're talking about ideas, and again, I have this vision that the people that are out there are trying to actually have conversations. I know that a lot of the people that are bigots and racists and so on, that's not what their goal is. Their goal is to push an agenda. But really, the safe space people, these regressive leftists, that is a coin that I just am in love with because it seems so accurate.
Be careful about calling them repressive leftists, though.
Regressive.
Either one, same concept. Remember, the Catholic Church had its safe space for over 1,000 years, and it even had the Inquisition to enforce it. So be careful how you're dealing with this, because it
And
goes both ways.
churches also have their own safe spaces legally under most circumstances. If you go to a priest, for whatever reason you might, and confess something, they're not obligated to tell the police or disclose that in any way, shape, or form. So if you've got an issue with safe spaces in general, you should also have an issue with safe spaces between a lawyer and his client.
I don't think you have to. I really do think you can take this on a case-by-case basis, but that ability to do that is being taken out of our hands. The choice to do that is being taken out of our hands. The consequence of a bad idea should be that people don't want to be around you. So it will naturally filter its way out. I mean, I've had to shed a ton of ignorance in my own life, and it wasn't because I was in a safe space. It was because I was being challenged, and I grew, and I became a better person, in my opinion, for it. And I don't understand how that's going to happen to a generation that's not going to hear dissenting views or even slightly deviating
But that's
views.
the thing. They're still going to hear those dissenting views. That's where I think you're caught up on. You're caught up on the concept of, oh, they're going to stay in this classroom all the time and be completely insulated. No, it's meant to be a place so that somebody who's emotionally getting beyond their grasp can go to where the other person can't follow and constantly hound them. So they can go, all right, collect myself, now I can go back out to the world and not fucking stab somebody in the throat.
And you know
That's
what?
the
And
concept.
I'll side with you, Al, on that one, but with a caveat. And the caveat is that the guy who's hounding him needs to be trained as well. You know, that guy, in my opinion, that guy's been watching too much Fox News. You know, we here
I
have
agree.
intelligent conversations because we respect each other and we don't shout each other down. But in a lot of cases, and I've seen this at schools, I saw this at Evergreen all the time, and that's about the leftist school you can possibly get. People shouting each other down just because they don't like what you have to say. Not because you're wrong, not because you're not speaking intelligently or because you're making a logical point, but because they don't like what you're saying, because they don't agree with you. And in my opinion, that's wrong too. You
And
need
I agree with that.
free speech goes both ways. It's not just free speech, it's free listening too. You are free to listen to what that other guy has to say, because you're going to grow as a result of it. And what Joel is saying, and I have to agree with him, is that the concept of safe spaces in the wrong hands, which it's very quickly degenerating into, is a recipe for disaster when it comes to free speech.
Absolutely. It's 1984. I mean,
It's worse than 1984.
yeah.
You're talking of Orwell's book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, I think if you're going to use the 1984 analogy, I have to put this out there. I don't think in 1984, when Orwell wrote the concept of 1984, he would understand. He projected that everybody would have a camera watching them. I don't think he projected the fact that we were carrying around our own cameras.
Oh yeah. I've heard that. I've heard that he would never have imagined in a million years that we would have done it to ourselves. And I agree. And the analogy is loose at best. I guess my concern is just from a purely, just from my own perspective and experience on this planet. I don't think I can think of a time that I learned a truly profound lesson in a safe space, so to speak. I really don't. All the significant lessons in my life have taken place in chaos, in just animalistic conversations in a way, just totally non-regulated. And I'm worried again. The slippery slope concept is my concern here. I don't know if it's justified yet. I guess that remains to be seen. But I see it happening potentially, and I think we should discuss it and set up what this means. Certainly there are reasons, good reasons, to have safe spaces of a kind. Do I think it needs to be any more widespread than what we've been sort of doing intuitively in society? I don't know. I don't think so.
See where you're going with this, and I agree with you. But let me throw an idea out there to you. One of the things that we've done in the last, I don't know, I'm just going to say 40 years. It's an off the cuff number. One of the things we've done is we've marginalized the idea of civility. Okay, Miss Manners. We've decided that Miss Manners is an old fuddy-duddy. We've decided that that the rules of civility are old school and that we don't need those anymore. We make fun of people on TV who have manners. You know, that's usually the jerk or the not the jerk, but the nerd, and the jerk is the one who looks cool. We've marginalized the idea of civility to the point where everything that made us the country that we are, all of the freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of press, all of that stuff came from the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment was built on the idea of civil discourse. And that's something we just don't do anymore because we've marginalized the idea of civility, the idea of putting your plate in a particular place and being disciplined about everything that you do, putting the fork and the spoon and the cup, you know, having that discipline and doing something in a particular fashion just because, not because it's a rule, but just because I want to display that I have this discipline, that I'm able to do this. That's not just an old school thing that's a rule. That was a form of discipline. In Japan, discipline is a way of life. You know, an old school Japanese guy will do something 1,000 times. He will fail at something 1,000 times just so that he can be better at it. he will keep trying until he's perfect. Edison did the same thing. Edison learned how not to make a light bulb 1,000 ways, and that's the discipline. That's the civility. The way we learn, Joel, you are absolutely right. The way we learn is by failing. I haven't learned a single thing from my successes. The only thing my successes have done is given me a chance to fail again because I survived. We learn from our failures. We learn from
Tribulation.
We learn from chaos. Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think that safe spaces give us that. I think that chaos is a part of the natural order. I think that civil discourse is a natural law. I think that if we allow our society to degenerate to a point where we are shouting each other down and if it's Fox News all the time, guess what? You're never going to be talking about the news. The reason they're cutting each other off all the time, I'm sorry, we've run out of time, is because they shout at each other so damn much. Shut up, stop, let the guy finish what he's got to say, and then add your 2 cents. And it's on that guy, just like me, I'm talking too long. In a couple seconds, I'm actually going to stop my train of thought wherever I'm at, and I'm just going to say, okay, I got to give somebody else a chance to talk, and I'm going to shut up. And that point is right now.
Yeah. I think an analogy to put this at, because obviously if you're extreme one way or the other, you're not going to have the appropriate dissent that is the catalyst for learning. The analogy that comes to mind is life doesn't thrive on the poles in this planet. Certainly it's there. Life thrives in the middle with the chaos and the storms and where everything's coming together. And the more we polarize ourselves, the less we're going to grow as a society.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with either one of those
Isolation
statements.
is not the key.
Wilson tried isolationism. That didn't work out so well.
Well, there's a lot involved with that.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Back to Princeton. We can talk about Wilson some more.
Yeah. No, I get where you guys are coming from, and I agree on 99% of it. My concern is for those that haven't learned the capabilities to have an opportunity to learn the skill set at a pace that's comparable to their capacity.
Well, Al, I'm just going to say, yeah, I agree with that, and I'm just going to say that I would like to now set up a safe space for myself, and I don't want to hear your dissenting view, Al.
And that's fine. And guess what?
I'm not ready for it
the
mentally.
podcast. I can eject you from it if you like.
Suppose that's true. Podcast purgatory.
Podcast purgatory. Wow.
When you can handle an adult conversation, you're more than happy to come back in.
Well, isn't that what we're talking about? Are college kids adults or not?
Some of them are. Some of them are 13, 14, 15.
Okay, well, let's not talk about the outliers, okay?
Believe it or not, it's moving. It's moving closer to that age group.
Yeah,
the
and
number
it probably
of
should be.
The number of 13 to 15-year-olds has gone up 22%.
Well, now,
is that an argument for safe spaces? I don't know.
Those Head Start programs that you're talking about, where 15 and 16, not 13 and 14, but 15 and 16-year-olds are going to college campuses to do their classes, that is because our public school system is failing miserably, and we know it. And we're giving those kids the education that they should be having in high school.
Yeah. These are arbitrary concepts, just right off the bat. So, I mean, certainly if a 14-year-old is learning at a level.
I thought you didn't want
schools,
to hear dissenting opinions, Joel.
That I was planting a flag. That's all I was doing there. Come on, man.
No, I know.
I was just trying to make a point. Yeah, I guess the theme is that academia should not be a place where voices are silenced or ideas are silenced, even the bad ones. I know that there are some really bad ones that really suck, and I'd really like to punch a lot of those people in the face, or possibly worse. But that's the world in which we live. That's what we should be preparing people for.
You know, and you just raised a good point about punching people in the face. You know, when civility is broken, there are consequences. You know, I think that in a big way we've been gradually moving toward a society without consequence.
Yeah.
I'm certain that black people would say otherwise, but the idea of free speech, the idea of freedom, is not devoid of consequence. You are free to say whatever you want, do whatever you want, walk up to me, punch me in the face, but you know what? I've got freedom of expression too, and I've got the right to punch you back. And I think that is a lesson that we're not teaching our kids.
And I don't mean, I'm going to look like an asshole for doing this, but there are certainly plenty of black people that share a view of freedom of speech. So I'm not sure saying that black people would disagree with you is accurate.
Joel's a racist.
Yeah. Actually,
Did I say that?
I thought you did. I thought you said black people would disagree.
Black people would disagree.
with consequences.
Yeah. Black people would disagree that society doesn't have consequences. I'm certain that black people feel repressed and that white people don't necessarily feel repressed, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah.
But,
okay. I retract that.
In the point that I was trying to make, if you create a society that has no consequences, absolute freedom is what I'm talking about. Absolute freedom means I can walk up to you and say whatever I want and you can't respond. That's what safe space says to me. It says I've got a place where I can go and express my view and nobody's going to disagree with me. Nobody's going to punch me back. There is no consequence for me to walk into a room and, I don't know, be a racist or be a sexist or whatever. It doesn't matter. I've got a place I can go and live in my little bubble. That is not reality, and that is the society without consequences that needs to.
That was the misrepresentation of what safe spaces are. Safe spaces really were and are designed to be like AA groups.
I get that, but remember, you had to research that yourself, and I doubt that was easy to research. And you probably had to dig a little bit.
That's a good point. John, that's a good point, because the perception of these things is not irrelevant. It is absolutely
a sense of reality. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just because something maybe is a certain way. When another person interprets it, a different way, that has its own momentum or something along those lines. It changes what it is in some fashion.
Mm-hmm. Public perception of what a safe space is very different from the reality of what you're talking about, Al. AA meetings are definitely a safe space. I absolutely agree, and I don't have any problem with that sort of thing. What I have a problem with is the public perception of safe spaces and what kids are perceiving to be a safe space.
That really is the crux of my argument.
So really it boils down to education.
It does. Yep.
And because you two failed to educate yourselves on what they actually are.
Fuck off. Oh, I was trying not to use any F-bombs. You just pulled it right out of me. Oh, man. Oh, I could kill you right now.
You want to bite the pillow while I put it back in dry?
Oh, God, I guess. Oh, you just fucking infuriate me. And I'm okay with that, just to be clear.
So yeah, I think what we're getting at here is not that we disagree with safe spaces, but that we disagree with people imagining There's that imagination going again, that a safe space means a place where you can live in a bubble. Honestly, that's what conservatives got right now. They've got this huge political bubble that they live in. And liberals have it too. The conservatives and liberals, they've got their own little bubbles. They go to lunch with people that think like they do. They read.
We all do that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's to an extreme that is becoming damaging.
It's almost as though we have this notion that we can create these different completely separate systems. Almost like you could say, well, in my country, we're just not going to have storms. That's what it seems like, that we're creating these areas in which that you think that you have this perception that you're not part of the bigger system. Well, that's not the way it is. You are part of this big system, and you've got to learn how to navigate through it in a holistic way, or you're not going to make it. You're just not going to make it.
And I'm going to make an analogy here to in the religious field of study, what we call that is a cult. And in many ways, 99% of Christianity is cultish. They have their little bubbles that they live in, their little cultures that they live in. That's where the word comes from. Cult, culture, okay? Yeah. So each denomination has their own little bubble that they live in. Each political party has their own little bubble that they live in. So what I'm getting at here is that instead of politics, we're not really talking about politics. We're talking about religion. We're talking about having a safe space. We're talking about having a bubble, believing that your bubble is superior, proving to yourself and to the people around you that your bubble is superior, and insisting that your way is best. That's pride.
I don't think that's the actual intent.
Whether
that's falling on a misrepresentation.
Whether that's the intent or not is irrelevant to the reality. The safe space, Al, that you're talking about, the AA meeting, the therapist, the counselor's office, those things, that's different. That's not creating a culture for yourself. But what kids are doing these days, and you see it on TV, you see it on the internet, you see it on Facebook all the time, what these kids are doing is they're taking their culture and they're making it a safe space. And I'm calling it their culture because it's not a widely held culture. Here's another example. The culture of staring at your phone all the time. And I'm calling it a culture because it really is. Your entire world, your bubble is within that phone. Your bubble is within the imagination that you are using to interpret what's on that phone. So whatever you see on that phone becomes a part of your existence, whether it's real or not.
Yeah.
I would disagree, but that's just me.
Well, but how? I mean,
disagree.
The evolution of. I'll shut up. Go ahead, Al.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
How do you disagree? I was talking about culture and how the idea of safe spaces can create a damaging form of culture that isolates rather than integrates.
The wording changed a little bit. I would agree with that wording.
Okay. And that's really where I was going with all of that. In Christianity, denominationalism are in fact those bubbles. Each denomination is a bubble, but there's also a subject that many non-Christians really don't like to talk about. It's a subject called Christendom, where that's the entire kingdom of God, so to speak. That's the whole of Christianity. That's Roman Catholics, Lutherans, Protestants of all shapes and colors. That's even Jews are included in Christendom. It's the idea that there's one God and that there's really one religion out there. It's universal religion, if you want to call it that. That's Christendom. It's the idea that there's one culture, but there are little splinter parts of it. And to imagine that your little splinter part is the part, or is the correct part, that's actually very sinful in Christian eyes, and it's really not the objective of Christianity at all. I think that America...
Many would disagree with you, but...
I absolutely understand why people would disagree, but
and those because all of this stuff ultimately are arbitrary, practically imaginary lines in the sand. The perception does cause an evolution to these ideas.
yeah,
So to say that you have this idea and it cannot be changed, and if it is changed, it's a misrepresentation, is not actually helpful, in my opinion, to what we're talking about, because the perception does cause it's a catalyst to change in the idea. You'll see that happen.
The issue I have, and why I don't think it's fair to say that, or even accurate to say, because I'm saying this is a misrepresentation, that it's not helpful. It is, because I'm educating you on what its actual intent is. And you're saying that because the actual intent of this car is to drive from point A to point B, you're telling me the public perception says that it's to fly to the fucking moon.
hang on
Your
a second.
misrepresentation of it
But those aren't arbitrary
is
things.
the irrelevant point.
We're not disagreeing with you that support groups are necessary. What
I'm
we're
not.
saying, well, okay, but what
Yeah.
we're saying,
No, I'm with you. I'm agreeing. I'm chorusing what you were just saying.
we're not talking about the reality of safe spaces. We're talking about the perception of safe spaces.
And that's what I'm saying, is Joel just said that because I say it's a mischaracterization that I'm not helpful. That's inaccurate. It's the exact opposite. By saying that you guys say that because this public persona, this public perception is what it's creating now. No, it's not creating that. You guys are buying into this public perception of what it isn't, as
We're
opposed
not
to
the
educating yourselves.
We're not the. But the thing is we're not the only ones. I mean,
I
we're
understand
in the
that,
majority.
but your job shouldn't be to reinforce the misrepresentation of the public perception.
No.
Your job should be educating what actually it is.
No,
Let
hang
me.
on.
Oh, go
We're
ahead.
we're not reinforcing the public perception. We're articulating the public perception. If you don't want it, okay, if you want your support group, then call it a support group. Don't call it a safe space. Safe space has a completely different connotation in the public's perception. So on Princeton, for example, don't call it a safe space. Call it a support group. That's fine. Nobody's going to argue with you about a support group. Nobody's going to look at you and say, "Oh, you're looking for segregation. Are you going to ask for separate bathrooms as well?" They're not going to say that to you about a support group.
You brought up a good point, the separate bathrooms concept, or the alternate perception. So people should adapt to what the public perception is. So if the public perception is that gay people don't exist, then gay people don't exist, or that they should be able to come out and go, look, I am gay, it's okay, or I'm transgendered, call me Caitlin now as opposed to Bruce. You're saying, and what you're saying is that because public perception is, don't call her Caitlin, call her Bruce, that she can't call herself Caitlin, or that she shouldn't be able to represent herself as Caitlin? That's
No way.
fucking stupid.
There's no way that we're saying that. That what we're saying
That's exactly what you guys just
we're saying that
saying.
the foundation that makes that true does not come from a mandate outside. It comes from the conviction of the person making their argument and changing minds.
It also has to do with what the listener, the person who's hearing about that idea, perceives. So if I'm talking about, for example, if I'm talking about greed, okay, if I say, Al, you know what, you're a greedy, selfish son of a bitch. But what I'm really, and I'm in my mind, my intent is that I'm giving you a compliment, that you're a good capitalist, that you've got your head screwed on straight, and you're making a lot of good money for your family, and you're a good supporting father. But the words that come out of my mouth is, you're a greedy, selfish son of a bitch. What does that say? Because I'm using the words in the correct connotation. And I'm giving you a compliment. But the words have a negative perception in the public mindset. So calling you a greedy, selfish bastard is negative. But that's exactly what you are. You're going to work, you're earning a lot of money, you're earning enough to support your family. that's a very selfish thing, and it's a very greedy thing. You probably give money to charities, you probably help people out, but either way, you're keeping more for your family than you are sending out. That's a good
See,
survival trait.
here's the
But
problem with that, and this is the counter, and it comes on Joel's side as well as mine, and that's people telling us, or telling me, and I've heard this quite a bit, don't use the word atheist. It has a negative connotation.
sure.
Well, fuck your negative connotation. It is an
Uh-oh.
Lost him.
Yeah.
of the issue.
Is somebody using your net at home, Al?
Somebody must be using your
Nope.
net because you're cutting pretty hard.
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
A little bit.
Okay.
You're still choppy.
All right. What did you miss?
Well, pretty
I'm
much
choppy. I have a full signal.
pretty much everything you just said. I missed, and I could hear John even trying to say that. So I mean, I never lost John.
Oh, okay. So doing this whole thing is the same thing that I hear, and I know Joel's heard it before, is when somebody says, don't use the term atheist because it has a negative connotation. You should use this term or word it in this way because the public perception of this term is negative. Well, fuck that. It is an accurate representation of what it is. You need to educate yourselves on what this term actually means. Not what you perceive it to mean, not what your connotation of it means, what it actually means and what it actually represents. I should be able to choose what words I want to represent my position. And if they want to call it a safe space, fuck it. My opinion is they have the freedom of speech and the freedom of choice to choose that representation and that term to represent themselves or the area in which they want to hold their support group. They shouldn't have to call it a support group. If they want to say this is a safe space for black teens, it's a safe space for fucking black teens. I need to learn to accept that terminology.
In a perfect world where everybody goes to college and learns the meaning of every word and every possible connotation that word might have, and in a perfect world where everybody learns to accept and be civil to each other, I will not disagree. And that is a perfect world. It probably will never happen, but you know what? I pray that one day we see that world.
Well, and I just want to say the power that from which I derive my ability to call myself an atheist and to not be corrected about that, that power does not come from anybody else. That power comes from myself. That power comes from my own personhood. And so again, the concern, you can almost look at this in a geographical sense, is that these areas in which criticism is no longer acceptable appear to be getting bigger and happening in places in the community where it could cause the most damage in the future. That is my concern.
You're talking about the places where those bubbles, where those cultures, where those safe spaces meet, that there's going to be conflict.
I'm saying that in academia, that is the last place where we should be stifling speech. I mean, that's just what I think.
I agree with that statement. But
I think what Al's trying to get across is that what these safe spaces are in fact support groups, and they're not actually places where free speech is being stifled. And I think that Al's probably absolutely correct about that. But
yeah, this is really weird, isn't
it? It really is. It's a really difficult topic. You know, feelings just are. That's something my mom and dad used to tell me when I was a kid. Don't try to change people. Feelings just are. You know, when in a relationship, you know, you and your other person that you're with, if you really love that person, you're not going to try to make them something that they're not. You're going to accept what they are, including their feelings. So when their feelings get hurt because of something you've said or done, you need to accept that, and you need to figure out a way of doing whatever it is that you are doing without hurting that person, without wounding that person. Now, mind you, I'm the guy who's always saying that wounds are what make us strong. So the person who's being wounded needs to accept that that's a growing experience for them, that is making them stronger. But the person doing the wounding needs to be aware that they are wounding someone, so that they try not to, if they care for that person. If they don't particularly care for that person and they want to wound them, you know what? Then start throwing some punches back.
Yeah, and it's really about it's almost like we're not inoculating. I mean, you can almost think about this in terms of vaccination. I mean, in my opinion, to a greater extent, that's what academia should be is a vaccination to these sort of bubbles that we all have kind of created for us, or a lot of us.
That is actually a great analogy, and here's why. Because there are some people.
You're going to tell me why my analogy is good?
No, it's a great analogy for my side. You actually made a great point for me, and that's because you understand how herd immunity works. There are some people who can't get that inoculation or can't get it until they're older. So in colleges, a lot of people are inoculated with, they've got the strong interpersonal thing. They can handle conflict, things like that. There are some groups in the herd that can't get that inoculation just yet. Maybe a year down the road, maybe 6 months down the road. Maybe they only need a week to adapt. Maybe need the full 4 years. But they will eventually get that inoculation, but they need those places to go to get away from the virus.
Yes, I just don't think those places are in academic settings all the time, or like what we're seeing as far as people being disinvited to speak at commencement ceremonies, or
those
even
are
just
completely different issues, though. That's the frustrating part, is you don't see the difference in the code.
They're linked.
Oh,
Not perfectly, but they're linked.
I
think it's again, we're not talking about closed systems here. All these things interact.
We're also not talking about support groups. We're talking about bubbles. We're talking about ideological and intellectual bubbles.
I see them as different.
I do too, Al. I will grant you that these things are different, but it doesn't mean that they don't impact each other. I mean, the strong force is very different than the weak force, but that doesn't mean they don't influence each other, and that you can't understand one without understanding the other.
And I'm not saying that there isn't an interaction. I'm seeing some of the examples you're giving aren't corollary to the issue at hand. And I don't know, maybe it's a failure on my part to find the right words or the right way to communicate my concerns. Or maybe I have, and we're just beating a dead horse.
Well, we're just coming to different conclusions on a lot of this. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, and I know you're okay with that. I certainly am as well. I'd like to see people have the best chance for success in this world, and in my opinion, the best way to achieve that is to, as early as possible, get people conditioned for the reality of life. And if we keep bringing that stick further and further along in life, we're going to run out of life to live in a real way. That's just how I see it. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I agree.
I agree to a point.
I know you do. You always agree to a point. Oh, I love you, Al. Even though you're a racist,
buddy.
And by the way, the strong and weak nuclear forces are more closely linked than you might think.
No, I know they are. But yeah. Okay. Quit fucking with my analogies. I'm doing the best I can. It's fucking, and we've been at this for what, 2 hours now?
No.
About an hour.
Really?
Almost an hour.
It's 12:30. I thought it was 1:30. Never mind.
So I think we should wrap this up before we start getting back into a conversation that I think has finally ended.
Yeah, I think we pretty well beat this one to a pulp. And
Okay.
I think we're agreeing more than it sounds.
I do too.
I agree too.
The language is failing both of us, all three of us.
I think so. And I think
yeah.
that's the problem. I think one thing we can all agree on is that freedom of speech and freedom of expression should never be impacted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're good to go. You want to take us out with something? Any words of wisdom before we leave? Any deepities that you'd like to throw at us, Joel?
Holy cow.
I kind of lost my momentum on that one. I don't have a big finish here, except oh. I don't know what just happened.
I don't either, but
Let me wrap you up with this one. A Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a pagan, and an atheist all walk into a coffee shop, and they talk, they laugh, they drink coffee, and they become good friends. This is not a joke. This is what happens when you're not an asshole.
I like that. We'll end on that.
Well, let me just throw this out here as another potential way to go out.
Al's a racist.
No. Maybe instead of focusing on the 0.1% of things that make us different, why don't we focus on the things that make us the same and strive towards bigger, loftier goals than who's right and who's wrong?
Stolen right off a George Carlin stand-up. I like it.
Yeah, and expressed accurately in Jesus' ministry as well. So, well done.
Oh, I disagree fully. We'll go into that in another. We'll go into another broadcast with that.
So you think you can break me, but you